This week on the Fall Guy podcast, Matt Jaskell sits down with former NASCAR Cup Rookie of the Year, Stephen Leicht. This is the Fall Guy podcast with Matt Jaskell.
Say action.
Action. You guys have been rolling for like 6 minutes now. Yeah.
All right. That's Michael. He's a new addition to the podcast. And here's our host, Matt Jaskell.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Thanks for joining us again. Sorry for joining us.
Well, if you watched our last podcast, our first podcast with Mr. David Starr.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Got a little emotional.
It did, but that was genuinely special, dude. What a cool guy, right? I mean, I knew that when he was my teammate, and it's kind of surreal, man. And hopefully, as we do this more, I'll share this more. But genuinely, man, having him as a teammate, like when I was growing up. I'm talking like 2001, man. When in the era when Dale Earnhardt Sr. died, man. I remember exactly where I was. Sadly, I hate to say it, sounds kind of dark, but like 9/11. Like we all remember. If you're a racer, you remember where you were.
Like the Kennedy assassination for folks in that time.
Right. It
really was.
And so for me, like I was at this go-kart track with my dad here in Vegas, but in that era, David Starr was a legend, and he still is, obviously. And it's like, to me, it is so awesome to speak to him. It is motivational. It's inspirational to see him busting his ass, doing well. He didn't have good luck in Daytona, but we talk about how that's not skill. That's not him. I mean, that's just the car.
I wanted to mention, too, we didn't show it. Maybe I'll put another clip out later of when he brought his boys in.
Yeah. When he brought the kids in, yeah.
Not kids.
Boys,
they're out there
young men.
working on his car. In fact, they fired up the car. They were tuning it or something while...
he's in his trailer. So if you didn't watch it, go watch it. But we're like, where are you? And he's like, I'm in my race trailer. So he was at this guy took the time, freaking getting ready to go to Daytona 500 weekend to race in the O'Reilly Series, what used to be the Xfinity Series.
Sadly, he didn't qualify.
Yeah, he didn't make the field, but man, this guy he has his own racing school at the Texas Motor Speedway. He was at the track in the evening in one of his race trailers, and then we thought we were getting this really bad distortion in sound. It sounded like somebody's rubbing a microphone up against sandpaper, and it was one of the race cars outside running. So man, this guy's a legend, man.
He just epitomizes
hard work, man. Yeah, America, hard-working man. Yeah,
the working man's driver, I guess.
Pound for pound, one of the hardest working drivers out there for sure.
And coming up, we're gonna have Carl Long, who, David's raced with him. You've raced with him, and our guest today is
Stephen Leicht, man.
He raced with him as well at some point, and you guys were teammates, which is incredible.
This is honestly, again, I mean, I don't think there'll ever be a time where I probably don't say it's special. Maybe, if we have you on as a guest, maybe not. I love it. But
is very normal, not special.
Steven is an interesting guy, man. When I met Steven, he is spicy, he's feisty. You sense that bitterness of him, and let me say this, the reason I identify that is because I've also many times been that exact same person.
I've witnessed that.
Yeah, and so he, but again, I was very grateful and lucky because as much as you could sense that from him, that frustration, a little bit of bitterness, even looking at me like, I should be there, not you, he still gave me everything. This guy helped me, gave me as much knowledge, made me come to his house, made me drive in his simulator, and then was my spotter. And when I say spotter, if you understand what a spotter does, especially when you're on an oval that you've never seen before, like Darlington or Texas Motor Speedway, this guy was driving the car from the spotter tower sometimes. I mean, he was just telling me what to do, and I was doing it, and we were driving halfway through the field. And I say we because without him, I would be lost out there. And there was many times where I'm like, tell me what to do, man, and he did. So
I had the privilege of witnessing that and listening to it while you were racing.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy language to learn.
It is not.
I don't think I could do it. It's so fast.
I work as a full-time spotter. That's how I make a living right now. I work for the Paul Miller racing team in IMSA. We just won the Daytona 24-hour in January, which was spectacular. But IMSA is being a spotter in IMSA is just a different flow. The drivers, it's more of a luxury for the drivers where it's mandatory in NASCAR. And it is a little bit of a different language, different speech and speed, different pace also. And man, I would never... I've done it at the Indy 500. I'm doing it again this year, spotting at the Indy 500. Again, I'm spotting for Connor Daly, the hometown hero, which is amazing, old go-kart teammate. Cool. So we'll talk about that some other time. But I don't think I'd ever want or could I spot in NASCAR, dude. It is. I don't think I could do it. I mean, the way these guys talk, how fast, the information, and Steven, not only as a driver, but he is a badass spotter.
Yeah,
So.
and he's a great guy. I've been communicating with him a lot in the last couple of weeks, knowing that he was going to be on this show and just trying to understand his story a little better. I know you know more of it than I do.
Producer, director. He does actually all the hard work. He just lets me pretend to be a star.
I know. He's more brawn than brain, so somebody has to do it. However, I have learned a little bit about him. I mean, he's a family man. He's working his ass off in another way right now. As our promo said, he went from driving in NASCAR to driving for DoorDash. And we're going to find out what the hell that's like and what his plans are to get back on track.
Yeah, I shake my head out of frustration a little bit, just knowing, you know, how hard guys like us, and when you hear his story and what he's hopefully willing to share about his life, his path in racing, man, it is, you know, it's frustrating, you know, when you dedicate your entire life from the age of 5 years old, you know, we're going into our 40s now, and sometimes, you know, racing seems to kick you in the nuts sometimes, to be quite honest, and we'll get into that story with him a little bit, and what his journey's like, and here he is.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hey, Steven, thanks for coming on, man.
Not a problem, guys. How's it going?
Man, it's going. So if you would really fast, Steven Leicht, everybody, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And we're going to get into who you are, who I am, why we're here. The more, you know, I always say, more importantly, the why, not the how. But if you would, tell us where you're at right now, man. What are you doing?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, at home, sitting in my son's room. My son's out with the wife and the grandma doing a little shopping. As anyone will tell you, with a 2-year-old, they grow out of the clothes about as fast as you buy them. So they're constantly on the move, looking for clothes for our little guy. But yeah, just sitting at home right now, talking to you guys.
Thanks, man. When did you have a kid?
So my son Caden was born in November of 2024. So he just turned 2.
Just turned 2 years old, dude. That's awesome, man. And how long you been in Charlotte now?
I've been in Charlotte for quite a while. I had a house over near North Lake Mall for probably 2 years, right before I ended up moving in with my wife. She wasn't quite my wife yet, but I've been down in the Charlotte area now for probably, I want to say, at least 10, 12 years.
That's awesome, man. And obviously we all know why, right? I mean, that is the NASCAR world, right? NASCAR land. And it was kind of, if you want to live in that world, you have to be there.
Yeah, you got to be somewhere near it. Yeah, I had places all over. I used to have I think my very first apartment was right behind Birkdale in a place called Red Cliff, back when I joined Yates. And then I built a house in Denver, North Carolina, which is just down the road from Birkdale and Huntersville. And then ended up at my dad's for a while, which we'll talk about and how that all transpired. And then ended up in another 2-bedroom apartment with a coworker, one of my buddies that was spotting for me at the time. And then I ended up in a house with him, and then I ended up at my wife's house. So been all over the place.
Let me jump into, so let's talk a little bit about, so we apologize for the my assistant, my director, my producer. He heard Denver.
I thought you were from Denver, and it turns out it's the wrong Denver.
Yeah, I didn't know there were 2 Denvers either until I lived in the one in North Carolina. So anytime I told somebody I lived in Denver, North Carolina, they assumed it was automatically Colorado.
Dude, so let's talk a little bit about how we know each other, which to me it's funny. I mean, I still to this day tell some of our stories, and especially obviously like the skydive into Vegas, and you know, and what, you know, you might not even know because we haven't talked about it in a long time. You know, NASCAR's, you might not remember NASCAR's stipulation to letting me do my skydive into my own race in 2021. But so I meet you in 2021, and you know, you were going to be one of my very first spotters. I'm sure you remember it pretty well. Do you remember where you spotted for me first?
Yeah, I did several of them, and I almost want to say that the skydiving one might have been my first time with you, because I remember it was funny because I told Carl, I said, you know, I got my suit and helmet ready. If this guy breaks his leg coming in here today and I have to jump in this race car, you're going to have to end up spotting. And we all had a big laugh about it. But
yeah, so again, we'll share it. I mean, you know, this story gets told a lot, but
May I real quick? So Matt seems to remember that when he first met you, you had an aura about you that you weren't quite happy that this nobody was coming into a race when you're totally capable. Do you remember feeling that way when you first got together with Matthew?
I mean, be honest, man. Like, because I can recognize the bitterness because we've all been there. I've been there where I'm like, damn it, why am I coaching or helping this guy? I should be in the race car. Even if you don't have anything against me personally.
Matt did it to me when I first raced.
Honestly, 2021, at that point, I had seen that so often. Like, when a guy comes in to write a check to drive, you're not going to be driving, you're going to be spotting or doing something else, or at least in the position I was in at the time. And I had already experienced so much of that I had no ill will towards Matt at all. I knew how the system worked, and I know how team owners did things. And, I'm the type of person that it really didn't matter if I was driving or not driving. If they were my teammate, I wanted to help in any way possible to, I remember, I think the reason why I like helping my teammates so much when it comes to like driver to driver is because I remember what it's like being the new guy, right? I remember what it's like sitting down in an Xfinity car or a cup car or a truck for the very first time. You have no clue what to expect. You get out on that racetrack, you don't know what it's going to feel like, you don't know how it's going to handle. How hard can I push before this thing really gets out of shape? I don't want to be the guy that goes out and wrecks on lap 2, pushing too hard. I also don't want to be the guy that goes out and doesn't push hard enough, and I spend the entire practice trying to get, up to speed, and I don't maximize that practice, the very first one, especially when it's your first time. And if I can do anything to help my teammate shorten that gap, I'm going to do that. And another way I always looked at it was I believed in myself enough as a driver and what I was capable of doing that no matter how much help I give my teammate, if we're both in cars together on any given weekend, I feel like I'm going to do better regardless. Whether or not that ended up being true, that's how I felt. I had enough confidence in myself that, my teammate's going to succeed or not succeed, but it's not going to be because I wasn't willing to help him or her.
Right, yeah.
So I was willing to do whatever it took.
And I have some notes, man. You were my spotter in some of the gnarliest of situations, in my opinion. Again, people just will never quite understand, the COVID rules in 2021 where there was no practice, no qualifying. And so I was getting in a car, and other people don't understand NASCAR, that when you go to a team, whether it's a high dollar team or a low budget team, every team, and I didn't know this either. I didn't really realize this till I started really getting into it, that the team will have 5 different race cars for different tracks. So, on TV, or when you see it on TV, or if you're a fan, you don't really know every intricate detail of it. The fans, they don't know sometimes that you're jumping into a different car. But what makes it unique with a low budget team, which was very interesting, and again, I wish people really understood this.
We're talking about MBM Motorsports, Carl Long.
Just one of them. There's multiple out there. But Carl, for our team, you were running with Carl. We got to be teammates briefly here and there. We tried to do. We did Road America. We drove at Road America together. That might have been the only time we were actually teammates in a car at the same time together. But you'll get into a race car, okay? And there is a short track car. There's an intermediate car. There's the mile-and-a-half car. There's a super speedway car. There's the road racing car. So there'll be sometimes 4 to 5 different cars.
And they might have a different front end and back end.
Well, yeah. Well, so I'm getting to that. Let me get to that. So my point is when you're with a low-budget team, there's Joe Gibbs Motorsports. There's Penske. There's all these big names that build cars. And they build them all a little bit different. The pedals are a little different. The switches are different. The seating position is different. And when you're with a low-budget team, they don't have all their own cars. They're buying and sourcing these cars from different teams. So every weekend that I stepped into a car, I was in a different car. Because I did Martinsville, then I went to Darlington, then I did like Texas and, Dover. I moved up to all these tracks. And a lot of times I was getting into a car, it was a different car every time. Yeah. And there was no practice, no qualifying. My first time bolting into this thing sometimes was just that moment before the race. And I had Stephen Leicht on the radio with me going, all right, bud, get your shit straight. We got to go, man. And I'm asking questions, and he doesn't remember, but I remember going, I remember looking, going, where's the switches? Where's the fans? And he's like, get on the wheel, buddy. We're getting ready to go green. So he was a great coach. And I know you might not know this, man, or maybe you do, but you drove the car sometimes. You were my spotter for when I got to race my first big truck race. When we were at, it was Atlanta, and it was when they had the new super speedway set up. You were on the radio for me, man, and I remember screaming, being like, woo! That was like Days of Thunder. There's photos. There was a huge crash in front of me. I couldn't see anything. It was all just tire smoke. And Steven goes, go low, middle, high. And I just just drove. I mean, he's speaking faster than you can almost process, and I couldn't see anything. And I just turned the wheel where he said, and it came out clean on the other end. And I went, woo!
Yeah, that's that language we were talking about earlier that you have to get with your spotter. I mean, it's a whole different language. It might as well be Portuguese to me.
I want to get into that with you, Stephen. I want to know a little bit about, if you were ever, we'll get into your early years here in a moment. I want to get into like how it all started, of course. But we'll talk about the Vegas race really fast, because that was, sadly, it was one of my, I raced a little bit the next year after that, but it was, one of my big ones in my hometown race. But yes, you said you had your driving gear ready. So for those who know, I did my skydive into the race. When NASCAR allowed me and said, okay, you can skydive into the driver intros of your own race under one stipulation, that you have a backup driver. This is for real. We have all the emails.
Know this.
Yeah, NASCAR, for me to pull off the skydive, we laughed. We're like, the only real stipulation NASCAR had was that there was a backup driver. Because if I were to, like you just said, break my legs or worse, NASCAR's like, the show's got to go on. The race is in the show. The car's in the show. It's got to run. So Steven, being a licensed and good race car driver and being my spotter, he was up in the tower and was genuinely ready in case something went wrong. And we all laughed that when I landed, the crowd and everybody went, woo, yeah. And Steven was like, shit, damn it. So if I would have broken an ankle, Steven would have been in the race car. So tell me really fast. Not really fast. We've got plenty of time. Tell me, because this is always interesting to me with a lot of drivers. I know, at least in where I came from, open wheel originally, it was always karting. But where did it all start for you, Steven?
It started when I was about 6 years old. I was born and raised most of my life in Asheville, North Carolina. But when I was 5, my dad got a really big job that took us out to Phoenix, Arizona. And that's actually where I started racing. I started racing go-karts, quarter midgets, champ karts, that kind of stuff. Dirt, pavement, you name it. If there was a road course or an oval, didn't matter if it was dirt or pavement. Within 3 hours of us, we had a cart that met the rule book, and we could go race. And that's how I got started in it. And then we moved back to Asheville when I was 7 or 8 years old, and just continued. We progressed up from go karts to champ karts to Bandoleros, Winston Minis, and I actually made my first laps in a stock car when I was 13 years old.
Where was that at?
So we went to, there's a new name. So now it's called, today, the name of the track is called Gresham Motorsports Park, I believe. Back then, it used to be called Jefferson Speedway, Peach State Speedway. And we actually, it's funny because as I got older, I remember actually going there and doing some testing in like trucks and Xfinity and Cup cars at some point, because it was back when we could still test, but you couldn't test on actual tracks you raced on. But you were still allowed to test. This was years ago, before they made the rule where you can't test at all. And so going back to the track that I made my very first laps on as a kid, I probably made 1,000 laps before I ever saw the racetrack with another car. And that was my dad's plan the whole time: get me up to speed by myself and comfortable enough that once I got on the track with other cars, I would pretty much know what I was doing. And so that's how, from the time I was 6 till I was 12, how that all transpired. And then started racing late models at 13 and did that all the way until I was 16 years old, and ended up going to a gong show. First of all, my dad, what an experience that was throughout my entire career of racing up till now. But especially back then, to be a kid and be able to do all that with your dad was just, you don't realize it at the time, but what a blessing that is, and something I always cherish. And my dad went broke. And you've probably heard this story from a million drivers, but my dad went broke. Yes. My dad went broke getting me to the next level. When I turned 16 years old, my dad ran out of money, and I had done well enough at such a young age that I had caught some attention of some teams from the ASA series, American Speed Association. And I got
raced it as well. If I stop you really quick,
Yep.
Dude, it's crazy how lives intermingle, man. And not to derail you, so in 2005, I strangely enough was racing ASA on the West Coast, ASA Truck Series. That's funny. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2005 is actually the year I won an ASA championship.
And ASA was big, man. ASA was big, especially on the East Coast. I mean, I was doing
very big. 5 wins that year.
5 wins in the ASA late model deal, man. That's big. Yeah.
Yeah, we had like 5 wins, 5 seconds. We had one hell of a year that year.
Yeah, that stuff was televised. I remember watching ASA, like, that was around the Hooters Cup stuff,
Yep.
era and stuff like that, and those were good. I mean, how many you probably had 20 plus cars a week 20, 30 cars every race. I'm guessing, especially on the East Coast.
Yeah. I think we averaged like 28 cars a race, so it was always a
Yeah.
full field of cars. It was always very competitive.
Do you remember was there any names that like made it to the top from that era? Do you remember?
So before I went into the ASA series changed around 2003 2004. They were completely different race cars than prior to that. Names like Gary Saint Amant and Reed Sorensen raced in it. Jimmy Johnson came up through ASA, and there's David Stremme. There's a lot of names, and I remember Kyle Busch was in his last season of ASA when I got to ASA, and that was around 2003, I believe. And in 2004, I was invited to a gong show for a team called Walton Racing. Howie Ledau
Real
was the crew
quick, for
chief.
my sister who listens, I'm sorry. Can you tell us what a gong show
Yeah,
is?
tell us what because I was in a gong show. I was on the Jack Roush gong show, but tell people what a gong show is.
So a gong show is basically, if you are lucky enough to get an invitation, they invite what they consider to be the top talent across the U.S. or across a certain region, whether it's the East Coast, West Coast, whatever. In this scenario,
show like that right now.
yeah. And so in this scenario, the one I went to was East Coast drivers. They were looking for young East Coast drivers that they felt like had talent. And you basically all get the same opportunity. You all drive the same race car. I believe we did our testing at Ileana Speedway, if I'm not mistaken. And you basically get to go out 2 times, make 10 laps each run, tell them how the car feels. Do you want any adjustments? You're allowed to make a couple small adjustments. You want to change the track bar, change some air pressure, change some wedge, simple things. You can't ask for a spring change or anything like that. Everyone's going to get the same car to drive that handles the same. And, based on what you like to feel, you're allowed to change a couple things. And then you go out and they put sticker tires on the car and you make a 50 lap run. And they do that for every driver. And this particular test, I think there was 12 people invited, 12 drivers. And I was 15 or 16 at the time. And
what were you driving? I'm sorry. Tell us what were you driving again?
It was an ASA car.
ASA car, yep.
Yeah, but it was the old, not the late models. This was the AC Doco series ASA cars. The ones that had the full bodies, the Corvette engines, the fuel injected engines, BF Goodwrench tires.
Yeah, like a step below the Busch series at the time.
Yeah, it was basically a Busch car with just different motor, different tires. And so you go out, you make your 50 lap run, and they're basically looking for someone, the one they're going to pick is going to be the most consistent, obviously the fastest, but also consistency. Howie Ledau himself was the crew chief. And I remember when I made my 50 lap run, he was down in 1 and 2 on a 4-wheeler, and he was watching every single driver that went out there for all 50 laps, watching their line. How consistent are they? Are they consistent on hitting their marks? What kind of speed do they have throughout a run? Are they consistent in speed? Are they the type of driver that takes care of tires, or do they just go really fast the first 10 laps and just fall out of the seat? So you do that, get done with your run, and then you basically just wait for a phone call. And that phone call is either going to be good or bad. And for me, I was fortunate enough to get a call from Howie, and he said, "You're my guy. I thought you were the most consistent. I think you got a lot of talent, and we want you to come race for us." And I ended up racing 2 seasons with them. 2004, we dabbled in the late models a little bit, but we were still running the ASA, the original cars, the Corvette engine cars. And when we got to 2005, we decided to just completely go all out on the ASA late model series, which is where we got the 5 wins, the 5 seconds, and the championship.
And so then that's a critical stage, man, what you're talking about. Like, I was a part of, most of my career, frustratingly enough, coming up as a young man, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, was through driver searches, or other words were gong shows, So I did the Skip Barber Driving Academy, this and that, man, and people don't realize what that does to the psyche of a young man, the stomach and nerves of a young man. Like you in your mind, you're like, man, my whole life, is based off of this, right? And what sucks is you never really get a chance to fully enjoy it sometimes. So you got 2 seasons out of it, which is great, but then tell us what happened next. Now, okay, great, you did 2 seasons, and now sometimes it all falls apart, or you're looking for that next step.
So shortly after that, actually before the season ended in ASA in 2005, Robert Yates called me and said, "We want you to come run a race with us in the Busch Series."
And wait, let's stop let's stop you there. So Robert Yates, let's for those that don't know, I mean, again, we're gonna have all kinds of listeners. Hopefully, who's Robert Yates?
Well, Robert Yates, if you remember years ago, if you ever saw Elliott Sadler driving the 36 M&M's car, or Dale Jarrett in the 88 UPS car, that was Robert Yates Racing.
Yeah, well, Robert Yates, one of the biggest names in NASCAR, and
legendary.
Yeah, legendary, and then later on, obviously becoming one of the biggest motor suppliers. No different than a Roush. Roush is probably more universally known, but Yates was right there, right? So
well, it's called Roush Yates Engines, so that gives you a clue right there, right? So Robert was Doug Yates' dad, who owned Robert Yates Racing, and Doug Yates has always been the head of the engine program.
So you get a phone call from Yates.
Yeah, I get a phone call from Yates, and they said, we want to take a car to Memphis. And my agent at the time owned Action Performance, used to be an apparel company, die-cast and apparel company for NASCAR.
Yeah.
And so Fred actually funded that race for me so I could go run that race. And showed up, had no seat time in the car, no testing or practice beforehand. I just got I don't remember if it was a 1 hour session or 2 hour session or whatever it was. We got done with practice and they said, "All right, bud, you got to go qualify your way in because we're not locked into this race." And I qualified 8th for that race. And we ended up finishing in the top 15. I think I finished 12th or 13th maybe. We had a pretty good run. Car was a little tight.
What year was that?
That was 2000, and I want to say that was the end of 2005 because I actually missed an ASA race to go do that race.
Gotcha.
So the following year, early in the year, I believe it was January, February, I did another gong show at Yates. Then this time, this gong show was to determine whether or not I was going to get to drive for Yates.
You're just going from one driver search shootout to another, man. Always fighting.
Yeah. Always fighting.
Unless you have a big paycheck,
So it was myself, a name Matt McCall, who's been a crew chief now for a while in the Cup Series. Him, me, and a few others. I can't remember the other drivers that were there, but I know Matt and I did our sessions on the same day. And it was, believe it or not, it was at Kentucky. And we got done with that gong show, and Yates couldn't quite decide between myself and Matt McCall. They weren't sold on either one of us fully. So they decided to split the ride in the 90 City Financial car with myself and Matt McCall in 2006. So him and I both ran half the races. And I do believe actually Elliott Sadler ran a couple of races that year in that car. And I think David Gilliland might have ran one. And basically they were trying to judge where Matt and I were at the time based on their equipment. Matt and I were struggling to run 30th most weeks, and it was no secret back then. Their Busch program wasn't very good in 2006. Their engine program was amazing. Doug Yates' engines were always the best. You couldn't beat those engines. But car balance, the aero, because back then you were building your own bodies, and they just didn't have what they needed to be competitive. So they would throw Elliott in the car once in a while just to see how he would run in it, and then get his feedback and listen to what he was saying about the cars versus what me and Matt were saying. So we did that all year. And at the end of 2006, City Financial and Robert decided that they felt like I was the better fit to drive for them full time in 2007. And that's what led to my 2007 season with Robert Yates Racing.
And how old were you at this time?
So in 2007, I turned 20 years old.
Man, you're 20 years old. It's like you're not even fully developed as a human being, right? They say your brain hasn't even fully developed. Was there? I'm curious to know. I mean, was there ever a moment? Was there ever a moment in that age? I know what it's like, man. You're just fight. All you care about, the only vision is just being a professional race car driver. Was there ever was there ever a defining moment of fear of failure, or man, I don't know if this is going to work out? I mean, was there a time even before that or during that situation?
It's one of those things where I think when you're in a car, especially since I did, half the season in 2006, and it never felt, there were times we showed signs of getting better, but we weren't getting better as quickly as we thought we should be. So as a driver, in the back of your mind, you're always wondering, I just ran 26th, I just ran 28th, I just ran 21st. Is it me or is it the race car? This is my first time at this level. You don't know if your cars aren't, or the reason why you're not running up front, or if it's you. For me, the defining moment of when I figured out I do have what it takes to do this at this level and be successful was about a third of the way into the season of 2007. The team worked endlessly, nonstop, every week, and we finally started seeing progression. We finally started getting our cars better. Each and every week, we were getting faster off the truck. We would, the week before we were 25th in practice, right off the truck. The following week, we were 21st. The next week, we were 18th. The next week, we were 15th. And just gradually got better and better and better. And by the time we hit the early summer stretch, is when I knew I can do this. I'm as good as these guys are. I know how to do this. I haven't forgotten how to do this. Our cars are finally where they need to be. And before I won that race at Kentucky Speedway in, I believe it was June, we were leading the week before in Nashville. And there's like 60 laps to go. We were leading. I thought we were going to win that race. And we blew a motor, and it was the only motor we blew all year. And just happened to be the week before we won our race. So any driver that goes through a stretch of bad runs, if you're not 100% certain you're with a top tier team and your cars are fast, you're just not getting the job done, you don't know. There's no way to know until the cars are right. And Yates's Yates was solely really a cup program team. They didn't have a strong Xfinity or back then Busch Series team until I joined, and they started putting effort into it. And so by the time we got to the middle and late part of 2007, we had a strong team. We were running faster and faster every week, finally running, getting some top 10s, top 15s on a regular basis, and every now and then having a chance. I think my last race of the year at Homestead, I finished 5th. So we finally built something good there. But sometimes those things take time. When you have a team that's solely been focused on one series versus another. And for them, they were always, I don't know if you guys remember, but there for a long time, you weren't sitting on the front row of the Daytona 500 if you weren't in a Yates car. You had to be in a Yates car if you were going to sit on the front row of the Daytona 500. There was a time and stretch there where they were always on the front row.
So let's recap a little bit here, if you will. Let me go over a couple things and even get myself up to speed, man, because it's a lot to take in when you look at your career, man. And so what you were running, was it the Busch Series at the time in 07?
It was 07. So 07 was the last year. It was the Busch Series. Dude, and then in 08, it switched to the Nationwide Series.
Right, so let's just stop there. That's right, Nationwide. So, man, you were running in the Busch Series, which to me is legendary in itself, right? I mean, like, we still, to this day, people want to call it the Busch Series. It's like, that's still how, just like Winston Cup. It's like the Busch Series, man, that was it. That was what you wanted to be. I mean, and people don't realize back then, it wasn't a feeder series. It wasn't kind of what it is considered today, what the Xfinity and now the O'Reilly Series is kind of the stepping stone. It was top tier, and it was one of the highest levels of motorsports in America. There was cup drivers running full time. You're running against some of the top guys, man. And when I looked into your career a little bit, after I would say we were teammates, we were friends, you were my spotter, you kind of arrived. Like there's drivers that come up through the steps, and there's all the different levels, and you didn't really, in my opinion, you didn't really follow any groomed path. You didn't come from a lot of money. You were just lucky enough, kind of like myself, that your father or your family had just enough money to kind of like get you there and get you into karting, but you had the talent to just kind of just show up, and you don't have a really clear defined path. You weren't like a multi-time karting champion, a multi-time junior stock car champion. You just kind of show up, man, and now here you are in the Busch Series, one of the highest levels of motorsports.
A bushwhacker. Yeah, that's what they call it. Am I right, Steven?
Well, they used to call the cup drivers that would come down to the Busch Series and win races bushwhackers. But yeah,
bushwhackers, yeah, because they come down. So you arrive in the Busch Series, and you even took a win, right?
Yeah, we won a Kentucky Speedway in June of 2007.
That's a big deal. I mean, so that's a big deal. So you win a race, man, in the Busch Series, and people don't realize how hard it is, man. Like doesn't guarantee anything, right? I mean, talent guarantees nothing. Even back then, when arguably it might have been a little bit less about bringing a big check. So
161 starts.
Yeah,
I see here, and then it looks like you moved on to the Cup series.
you did some races in Cup,
2006, I guess.
But listen, you told me a story, back, not just a story, I mean, kind of your life, like where things happened, and it all seems to kind of happen in that '07 era, if I'm not mistaken, right? How do you go from winning a race in the Busch Series, proving yourself, and where does it all kind of go wrong, if I dare say?
So there's a lot of things that tie into what I believe went wrong. And I know you guys probably have it on your docket to talk about. It's no secret that some people don't know. I struggled with an eating disorder for a while, and then a little bit of depression, a little bit of drinking issues. And all of those things stemmed from what started to transpire at the end of 2007. And I think it's important to start there, because to really understand the whole thing and how I got to the dark place in my life versus where I'm at now, and how it started off so well and ended up so badly, you got to understand what took place. So 2007, like I said, we started off the year, we didn't have great race cars. They were just mediocre. We got better and better and better, and then we hit that summer stretch, started running well, started running in the front, almost won Nashville, blew a motor, and then we win Kentucky. So now we're rolling, right? Now, back then in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, winning a race at that level, I mean, you almost guaranteed yourself a ride for a long time.
Absolutely.
You win a race, you're not going anywhere. Someone's going to put you, if it just so happens it doesn't work out with the team you're with, somebody else is going to hire you. You've shown you can do it. You've shown you belong there. You've proved it. So as the year went on, after we won that race, Robert Yates brought me into the shop, wanted to talk to me for a few minutes. And so that year was Dale Jarrett's last year in the '88 UPS car for Robert Yates. Dale was retiring. And Robert had a discussion with me, and we talked for a little bit. And he said, I want you to be my guy. I want you to drive this '88 car starting in 2008. And I was honored, right? Such a prestigious car driven by Dale Jarrett, Robert Yates Racing, the '88. I mean, it's such a big deal, right? So I was thrilled. I was like, I would love nothing more than to race for you in this car. That is awesome, man. Thank you so much. You're the one that gave me my big shot. I won't let you down. And he shook my hand.
Potential to be a star in NASCAR, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and he shook my hand, and it was going to be a done deal. And we didn't draw a contract up or nothing, because that's, Robert was one of those few guys, kind of like a Childress, where if he told you he was doing something, he was going to do it. And you shook hands, and it was good as gold. So as the year went on, I had 2 phone calls between the time I won the race and the time that the last race of the year came around in Homestead. One was from my agent, Fred Wagenhall, who said, Chip Ganassi's interested in you driving one of his Cup cars in 2008. So the first thing I did, like I always do with any big decision in my NASCAR or racing career, is I called my dad. And I said, Dad, Childress or Chip Ganassi's interested in me coming over and racing for him in the Cup Series. And we talked about it for a while. And he said, Steven, I'm going to leave it up to you. It's your career. You do what you think is right. If you think you want to go over there and you think you're prepared for that, you can do that. If you don't, then I'm behind you no matter what. So I told my agent, Fred, I said, listen, tell him thank you, but I really think I need to stick it out with Yates. He's basically telling me I'm going to take over this '88 car next year, and he's the one that gave me my first shot. And I'm a very loyal person, right? You're loyal to me, I'm loyal to you. There's no question about it. I'm not a whatever they call that, wagon jumper or band jumper or whatever that term is. I don't do that. So I felt like I owed it to Robert to stay there and try to build their Cup program, kind of like we built the Xfinity or back then the Busch Series program back to their winning ways. A couple weeks later, I get another call, and it was from, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Kelly Earnhardt, and she wanted me to drive their '88 car in the Xfinity Series the following year in 2008. So same thing. First phone call, Dad, I got this I just got a call from Earnhardt. She, the Junior Motorsports, they want me to come race their car next year. And same thing. He said, Steven, you're a big boy. You gotta decide what you want to do and make the decision you think is right. And so I thought about it a while, and I ended up calling her back and kind of told her the same thing. I said, I appreciate the offer. Maybe in the future we can, get together and I come race for you guys, but I feel like I owe it to Robert to stay with Robert. And I'm supposed to go in this 88 car next year. And I feel like I owe it to them to stay here and see what I can do with these guys. Well, while that's going on, and something no one really knew of as far as internally what was going on at Robert Yates Racing, is Robert was struggling with his health, and nobody knew. So about 4 races left in the season, maybe 5 at most, Robert announced he was retiring. So, and at the time, I wasn't really worried that he was retiring, not thinking that anything was going to happen on as far as what I was supposed to do the following year with them. But I did know that Doug Yates was most likely going to be the one that took over the program, being his son, and he runs the engine program. And a lot of people don't know this, but up to that point, Doug and I didn't see eye to eye all the time. There's a couple reasons for that, but it was never any bad blood between us. But him and I just weren't on the same page with certain things about our race teams. And it was no secret that David Gilliland was Doug's guy. Doug really liked David Gilliland. They had a really close relationship. And so when the end of the year came and Robert announced he's retiring, I got a call from City Financial. City Financial said, Steven, did you know anything about Robert retiring? I said, no, sir. I said, you heard it the same time I heard it. I had no idea. And City said, well, we were kind of left in the dark on this. So I don't know who was taking care of the PR stuff at the time at Robert Yates Racing in 2007, but I believe whoever it was, I can't even name a name, so I'm not going to try, but whoever was doing that type of stuff, I believe dropped the ball a little bit on not giving City Financial, one of their big sponsors, a heads up on what was going on. And so City, I can't remember his last name, but first name Mike, who was the main PR rep for City Financial Bank, said, Steven, we love you, man. We've enjoyed being with you, working with you. We think you're a great spokesperson on TV for our program. But we're going to have to probably seek another team to go after and see about racing with, because we don't want to stay here after not really knowing what was going on and not being told. And so all that's going on, right? And then the end of the year comes, and about 2 races to go in the season, Doug Yates calls me into his office. And he says, hey, man, we appreciate what you've done for us. We appreciate all the hard work and effort you've put in, but I believe next year we're going to go a different direction. And it wasn't a very long conversation. It was very short, direct.
Yeah.
He didn't have to say I was fired, but I pretty much gathered that from the conversation.
Right.
And so the year ended on a high note. We finished 5th, and Robert was down there in pit road and shaking my hand and says, you're going to be all right, man. You're going to be all right. You can do this. I believe in you. And then I was sitting without a ride. I did not get the 88 ride like I was supposed to. And now I'm stressed, right?
Opportunities fizzled, I imagine.
The other phone calls, obviously. I mean, those other seats get filled. Those other phone calls that you had.
Yep. So, and here's a real twister for you, right? One that's a real gut punch. Do either of you know who drove the 88 the following year in 2008? It was his first time full season that ended up in that ride that I turned down. It was Brad Keselowski.
Oh wow!
And look where Brad's at now. So that was kind of like a double punch to the gut for me.
Of course.
But I've been asked this question though, and I want to say this out loud. I've been asked if I knew back then what I know now about what was going to transpire at the end of that year, would I have still made the same choices? No. If I'd have known what was going to take place, then I would have taken up one of those 2 offers I had been given. But do I regret making those choices? Absolutely not. If I had to do it all over again, not knowing, I'll never lose a second of sleep over the choices I made, because I know I made the right choices for the right reasons. Wow. And nothing will ever make me feel like I didn't. And so I don't regret.
It says a lot about the character of a race car driver, because I do believe that race car drivers are just wired differently, when it comes to when it comes to loyalty, especially, man, like you just said something kind of profound. I hope people really take note to is that if you knew then what you know now, would you make the same decisions? No. And you expect somebody to say, oh yeah, no, I would not have made the same decisions. But do I regret my decisions? No, I don't. And that says a lot about who you are as a human being, I think, obviously.
It says a lot about this industry as well, auto racing, because David Starr, we just had him on, and he was talking about a time when he lost his ride, and it wasn't his fault, nothing he had done. And, he got very emotional about it because it was such an impactful moment in his career.
Yeah. You're making, I mean, gosh, man, you were 20, how old were you again? Sorry? 21?
I was 20 years old at the time.
You're 20 years old and you're making decisions that will certainly completely change and, alter the outcome of your life. And I know things happen like in just like a whirlwind. Was there something that younger Steven needed that he didn't get that, like anything, whether it was support, mentorship, guidance, was there something that 20-year-old Steven needed that, because you say you look back, you don't regret anything, but is there something that you can say that young Steven needed but didn't get in that era?
For that situation with what took place, short of someone that had enough experience in the NASCAR industry to say, hey, you don't have anything in writing that you're driving this 88 car. You really don't have anything lined up. You really need to consider taking one of these two offers. But even if I'd have had that voice in my ear from someone, I'm not sure I still would have not made a different choice. Or I'm not sure I would have made a different choice. I probably would have still said, no, I'm staying here. Robert's a man of his word. I'm driving this 88, and I don't want to jump ship because he gave me my start in this. He got me to where I'm at when, it was, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Even if I had someone that was just really, really certain that I needed to consider one of those two options. Maybe the conversations would have been different. Maybe I would have went to Robert and said, hey, I got these two offers. I know you said I'm driving this 88 next year. Is this something we can put in writing? Because I'd hate to pass up an opportunity if I don't have for something for sure here. And that's probably the only thing that would have been different. And there's no clue. And there's no clue how that conversation would have went. Would he have drawn up a contract? Maybe. Would he say I can't draw one up now, but we can draw one up later? Maybe. You don't know.
Being fired by Yates, was that the low point then?
It was the low point for me at that time.
That was probably, I mean, because if you look at your career, luckily, things were, I'm not going to say like smooth sailing, there's always going to be those, difficulties and little setbacks, but this is definitely, like you said, the real setback, the real gut punch where you're 20 years old, you just got smacked in the face, and now you don't know what's going to happen with your career, if anything at all, right? Is this kind of that defining moment in your life, do you think, where things really shifted?
I think that was the start of it. It's like, what more could I have done as far as proving my ability to drive a race car, right? I won a race, finished 7th in the points. I think all but one driver in front of us in points were all Cup guys. So it's like, I'm not sure I could have done anything different from a competitive standpoint to have changed that outcome. Sometimes, and more so today than back then, it comes down to relationships. And I had a close relationship, a good relationship with Robert. And unfortunately, Doug and I we didn't have that type of relationship. And I think that was a lot of what led to me not having a ride there at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But I will say, on a brighter note, it made me feel better as a driver. And you'll attest to this, because when it does happen, it feels good. First week of December, right? I've made several phone calls trying to figure out what I'm doing. I ain't got a ride. I'm starting to panic. An unknown number calls. I don't know who it is. I answer the phone, and it's Richard Childress. He says, hey, what are you doing next year? And I said, well, and I didn't go into the full details of what took place, but I said, I don't have a ride at Yates, and right now I'm looking for something. And he said, come to my race shop and let's talk for a bit. And I ended up next morning, got up 6 a.m., drove 2 hours over to Welcome, sat in his office for a while, and and he was gracious enough to say, Steven, I know you're talented. I think you can do this. Come race for me. I will fund you in 4 races out of my own pocket in 2008. And before the end of the season, I will have you a sponsor. So I chose to do that. And I'm not sure if you guys recall, but that was the year that the recession hit America really hard.
I mean, we'll just so you know, I've been
Really
waiting
hard.
to bring it up because as any racing, I don't care if you are any racing driver that was born in the 80s or 90s, then the recession, the 2008 economic collapse, our version of the Great Depression, changed the course of your racing career unless you were a rich kid. So like it of course, dude. I was, funny enough, sadly or ironically enough, I was unfortunately waiting to say, okay, man, so now you just got the worst gut check of your life in motorsport in 2007, and then not knowing you're going to go into one of the worst years in American history in 2008 economically. So I say this out of morbid curiosity, but yeah, to love to keep hearing your story because I know it parallels mine probably and a lot of other drivers out there. So please share what happened. So now you're with Richard Childress, another one of the most powerhouse names in NASCAR. He gives you an opportunity, and let's make people clear that there was still, even back then, you still had to have money. Somebody's got to pay the bill, and in NASCAR, they were able to find money a little better. Some of these big teams are willing to bring money to a driver like a Stephen Leicht. They're willing to find the sponsorship. There was more money to find back in that era, I believe, in my opinion. So now he gives you an opportunity to give you 4 races funded out of his own pocket, and that he'll find you the sponsorship. So tell us what happens.
So the 4 races that I ran did really well in. The very first one was California. Second race of the season. I didn't get to race Daytona. Go to California. Clint Boyer was my teammate in the 2 car, and I was in the 21. And we finished 7th and 8th, I believe. He was right. I was on Clint's bumper at the end of the race, trying to get by him. And we got done with that race, and Childress seemed pretty happy. He was pumped up. He's like, all right, I know our race cars are close. You both got everything you could today. We're going to go back to the shop and start winning these races. That's this type of person Childress is. He's constantly trying to figure out what he needs to make his cars faster. Went to Talladega. I actually led the race at one point in the 21 car. And so that race that year, I don't know if you guys remember, but that's the race where the car came off pit road and Carl Edwards ran into the back of that car that pulled up in front of the field and caused that massive 25 car pileup. Yeah. I was right in the middle of that.
It just weirdly enough, man, that just circulated on social media recently. I think
I was right in the middle of it. We had a super fast race car, and then when that happened, when you're in the middle of that, there's nowhere to go. You're wrecked with everybody else. Nothing you can do about it.
We have a production manager here in our professional studio. So Michael, who we're going to give a shout out to really fast. He's the reason we have nice cameras for this episode. So give us a little bit of info here. Come on.
So I've been trying to stay quiet. I don't want to interrupt you guys. But
this is a family show, man. This isn't Dale Earnhardt Jr. over here.
I pulled it up, Steven. Your first race in California for Childress, you finished 10th.
Oh, 10th.
So
okay.
I'm looking at it.
Oh, no big deal. How to top 10?
Yeah, top 10.
I knew it was top 10. For some reason, I thought it was 8th, but yeah, it might have been 10th.
That's fucking awesome.
So that was a shootout, right?
No, it was a race.
No, California Speedway. It was the second race of the year.
California.
They did a shootout race from California at one point. I don't know.
Mike, stop talking.
This Mike is talking.
Yeah, the guy that knows the facts.
So he had a 10th in California, 12th in Nashville, 7th in Phoenix, and then obviously the big wreck at Talladega put him 34th.
Dude, but still,
that's pretty good.
You had an average finish. I don't do math in public, but that's an average finish of a top 10, 3 races in a row with a new team, and it genuinely frustrates me, bro. As a friend, as a driver, it pisses me off when somebody goes out there and performs like that, and it forget.
So it gets better. It gets better, but it's also worse. Is the following year? I don't know if it was the following year or the year after. I was 2 or 3 year stretch when I did some racing for Childress. Never full time, always part time. Yeah. Okay. But the year Nashville, the following year, I had 2 teammates. I had Scott Wimmer.
Wait. Sorry. Hold on. Following. So in 2008 though, this is in 2008, right?
That was in 2008.
So let's not gloss over that. So in 2008, you have a deal with Richard Childress. You go and finish and average a couple of top 10s. and you have one, you're in a big crash in Talladega. That's normal. But then the economic collapse happens, and obviously you don't get a full ride. So let's just make that. So then boom, you get hit with the economic. So you go prove yourself in the first 3 races. Economic collapse, no funding, no money. How many races did you do in that year? Do you remember?
I believe it was only 4 that year. There might have been one other one I don't remember.
He did a 5th race at Texas the end of the year where he finished 18th in Texas.
And you had a top 20 in Texas. So economic collapse takes you out, just like it did like a lot of us. But luckily, so you were able to rebound a little bit. You said so. 09, you raced for him a little bit more again.
Yeah, 09 I ran in several races, and one of those races was Nashville, and this is one of those things that'll drive you absolutely insane as a race car driver. My 2 teammates, I believe, were Scott Wimmer, and I don't remember if it was Clint Boyer or Jeff Burton driving the other car. But I was in the 21, and all of us were super fast. I mean, everybody at RCR had those cars hooked up at Nashville. Early in the race, we're all running in the front. I can't remember where I was at the time. I might have been running 7th or 8th or something. Really good, but we were moving forward. And something in the right front started feeling off. And as the race went on longer and longer, the right front started falling in, and I didn't know why. And the steering wheel was moving. So we came down pit road and found out that they had forgot to safety wire the upper shims in the upper right front control arm. And the shims were falling out. A race team that doesn't make those mistakes, and I wasn't getting very many opportunities to drive for them. And I ended up being able to finish the race with, missing 3/4 of an inch of shims, with turning the wheel way more than you're supposed to go straight down the straightaway and get through the corner. I finished the race without wrecking it. But Scott or Jeff or whoever was one of the other 2 team cars won the race, and the guy and my teammate that won the race, we were better than. I told my crew chief, I was like, we're better than these guys. We're going to pass them at some point in this race.
So with the car falling apart, shims falling out of the front end, which nobody understands. If you don't understand, that essentially changes the entire geometry of the front steering. You finished 11th still.
Yeah,
not to piss you off, because it is frustrating.
That's a racer.
But ended up, I believe, I don't remember if it was that year or the year after. I want to say it was the year after that I ended up splitting the Holiday Inn ride in the 29 with Jeff Burton and Clint Boyer.
Nice.
We all ran similar amount of races. I think we all had roughly 9 races or so, maybe 10.
Well, that's a wrap on part 1. Huge shout out to Stephen Leicht for leaving it all out there on the track. But hold up, part 2 is coming in hot. Stephen finally breaks it down, how it all went wrong, shuts down those serious rumors once and for all, and puts it straight out there to the universe he wants back in a car. And you know how we roll around here at the Fall Guy Podcast. We always root for the underdogs. Until next time, keep living loud.